The Italians pick up a 2-1 win over Norway. And this is the first time since 1997, Christine, that Italy is in a semifinal, that they've won a knockout round, that they've made it this far. There were so many that counted Italy out. I'm getting a lot of hate right now in my text messages and my DMs right now because I had counted them out earlier this week on other Golazo Network shows. What makes this team different, Christine, that they were able to get the job done today against Norway?
Yeah, we've seen a massive shift within this program. It went from being this largely rigid defensive team in 2013, and we had a much elder squad, I'll say. I know that things have changed significantly as we arrive in 2025, but the average age of that squad was 27 years old. It was led by Panico, Tutino, Gabbiadini. And more importantly, you know, they just they stuck to a plan. They didn't make any adjustments. It was kind of your, not that it's stale calcio, but it is more a sign of the times, right? You sort of played your tactics and that was it. And they weren't very reactive. Again, weren't particularly interested in having their share of the ball. It was more working on counters, what you could do with what you had. 2025, we arrive with a squad that's younger, that's more flexible, that's fluid, that's reactive. We see them switch between a 3-5-2, sometimes a 4-2-3-1. Sometimes we see them in a 4-4-1-1, and they know how to get the better of their opponents. And so, because they have this talent and it has evolved greatly, right? Girelli, not the youngest, but has been with the squad for quite some time. Captain Giuliano, who's an amazing talent out of Roma. You have Linari, and like they're just so well rounded that they anchor the squad out. I think that those are sort of the key pillars. And now you have this rotation of players that are so talented coming into it. And there's more of an emphasis on possessing the ball.
Yeah.
Control the tempo of the game, attack. They have a finesse about them when they have to sit in a mid block and they can set it up effectively. They aren't playing scared anymore. And so it's getting to be a more attractive, entertaining brand of calcio than we've seen in the last decade.
That's the biggest thing that stands out to me about this Italian team is not only the tactical flexibility that they're able to deploy against various opponents that we saw throughout the group stage, and
including Spain.
Exactly. To get an opening goal against Spain, go up 1-0 against the reigning world champions, to me, that says so much more about the gumption of the group, the swagger, the ability to be really brave on the ball in the opening 10 minutes of a match. There was not a single game so far in this Euros where Italy stepped on the pitch and they looked scared to go against giants of Spain, giants Norway. No, not at all. They were like, we deserve to be here. We have this immense confidence, and then we're going to back it up with the style of football that we play. It's been really fun to watch these Italians ball out.
Watching them sort of use the width too more than we've ever seen them do, to even like sort of trap other teams to push them wide. A Spain, for example, that wants to build centrally, that they try to keep wedging out. They did it today again with Norway in these sort of 3v3s along those sides that were really, really effective. And they stick with what works. They change what doesn't, and they're more fluid in how they do it. You get caught out. You saw even Di Guglielmo ride a little bit higher when you made the changes for later in the game, and you saw Breggi sort of sitting. She sat deeper. She sat higher during this game. There were things that they all did, including Manuela Giuliano, who we don't talk about enough, who controls a lot of what happens through that midfield. The midfield of this Italy side is sort of the heart of this squad, and they make things go brr, brr, and it's great.
I became a huge Caruso fan this tournament. She has been on fuego and just so much fun to watch. The amount of work that she puts in behind the ball and on the ball to get into the final third, getting shots off. That cracker that she had in their first game, which is 20 yards out maybe, just got her head up, took a touch, had a cup of tea, and just smacked that thing in upper 90. And I'm like, oh, who is this girl? Let me go ahead and Google it. I did all the research, and I'm like, okay, now I'm a huge Caruso fan. But you know what? I have to give a lot of credit to player for Roma. You mentioned her earlier, Guglielmo.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, how amazing she is 1v1. I was excited to watch her and Gaupset go up against one another because Gaupset is so great 1v1 on the ball. We saw 2 goals, 2 assists against Iceland. And then moving forward, I wanted to see her going up against Guglielmo, and because Guglielmo is so good behind the ball, 1v1 defending, and she's been so impressive. So Caruso and Guglielmo have been just outstanding this whole tournament from first game to the last minute.
That's such a good shout, Jess, because you also saw the Guglielmo tasked with handling Caroline Graham Hansen
to top
and
it off.
I think that for me, not that I ever doubted her, I think that as we wade further into this competition, that was an excellent test of what she could do, because CGH she's world class. Okay. Like, that's a hard player to track and stay on lockdown. And she deserves her flowers just for that today.
The organization defensively from Italy was very impressive all tournament. But again, it's their flexibility to read a scouting report, to be able to adapt in just a few days' time, look tired at times, stick to the game plan. Like, there's so many waves of emotions that Italy has had to roll throughout this tournament. And frankly, they've stood strong. They've stood the test of time. Even when Norway kind of yanked the tug of rope towards their end, they gained momentum. It was a big stretch, probably 20 minutes of play, where I was like, oh, Norway is going to run away with this. But we're seeing the longevity too of these players, Christine. And I think in these major international tournaments, so many nations are often tested, and it's a deep reflection of the domestic play. So how does what Italy is doing right now in the Euros, how is that a direct reflection of Serie A Femminile, or also, how is that going to change the domestic league in Italy?
Yeah, so a lot's happened with Serie A Femminile. Only in 2022 were they officially professional women footballers. So prior to that, and if we look back to 2013, those were all semi-pro. They did not have access to elite facilities. Some of them also had other jobs that they needed to get by. They didn't have medical insurance. A lot of the things that we've talked about in world football as a crew here at Attacking Third has focused on that a lot. And I do think that it's still very important to shine lights on that, because as it changes, certain places change slower than others. So with that step forward, you see the proliferation of academies. We've seen more youth influx into who gets involved with these Le Azzurre as a whole. And then on top of that, not only is the league growing, the competition's getting better, the players have been cultivated to an elite level where you're seeing them play not only just in Serie A, but more broadly. So you have Ariana Caruso, who's out on loan at Bayern, playing in the Frauen Bundesliga. You have Dragoni, who got her start at Barca Academy. And so I think that diversification, plus the fact that the competition level has risen so good for Serie A Femminile, you have these squads regularly competing in Champions League, and they're making deep runs. And I think that Champions League experience is absolutely vital for teams with players that come back to their national team duties and are able to perform and are a little bit more fluid and moldable in terms of the asks upon them. And I think that that's what we're seeing for women in modern football.
I mean, even look at Sofia Cantore, the first Italian to come and play in the NWSL. She'll be here in a couple weeks playing with Angel City. That, to me, says a lot about the evolution of Italian football and how these players are able to go to different leagues around the world and compete with the top teams.
Absolutely. And Lisa, you hit the nail on the head there. I don't think that people really have a deep appreciation for how important that is, that she's leaving Italy to come play here in the NWSL. One, that problem, and I'll say it's a problem because I do think that Italian calcio is very insular. That's both the men's and the women's leagues, right? So you don't see very many players leave Italy and also have great success. So I am absolutely rooting for her. She's got a lot of talent. I think that it's going to be very interesting. We know the ins and outs of NWSL, right? Mm-hmm. She's going to be a little bit more physical. She's going to be in there hoofing it out. I think that she'll come out a diamond for what it's worth playing at Washington Spirit.
All right, well, we're celebrating here with Italy. You know, Christine's waving that flag, but Italy gets to celebrate tonight. Perhaps that's it, because, man, they get a turnaround and they have to play in a semifinal where they will either face Sweden or England in the semis. I mean, it's a pretty tough draw, Jess, but if you're on this Italy team, who would you rather face, England or Sweden?
Truth be told, I would probably want to go up against the Lionesses. I think that they have a few more weaknesses than Sweden does. Seeing Sweden this tournament, and we touched base on this not long ago, how they come together after each goal, coming in as a collective, whereas England, they didn't quite start the tournament off on the right foot. We see their weaknesses. Not everything's perfect and fresh. And so I think that, just being able to see them lose in their first game up against France, I think that they might be the weaker link out of them and Sweden. So I'm going to go with the Lionesses at this point.
Well, we were on the show earlier this week, Jess, and I think it was you that was saying if Sweden wins, they're going all the way to the final. So on that logic, it makes sense. But if I'm Italy, I don't want to play England. I don't want to play against these Lionesses that are hitting such an impressive stride right now, scoring multiple goals in a variety of ways, so many different goal scorers. Their strength in numbers continues to multiply on the pitch. Whoever's coming in, it would be a very tiring game. And I think this game today for Italy was also pretty tiring. I feel like the Italians would rather play Sweden.
Kupo.
I mean, in my opinion, and I did my little brackets and then didn't post them. I have them in my drafts that said that Italy would win today, but I also chose Sweden over England. And that one's kind of rough, only because I do think that this tournament has probably been a little bit of a bitter pill for Sarina Wiegman to swallow. She's not used to having a go quite like this, but I think that England, given the number of returnees that weren't really fit, that they've had this sort of wonky up and down already in this tournament, I think that they're more susceptible to some of the ways that Italy can hurt them and contain them than they would. I think that Sweden would be a harder go for Italy. I do. I think just because they do have some lethal shooters, but also they're so regimented and organized that it's very hard to pull them out the way that they can other teams. And they have done that really effectively. I don't know. I know that there's usually an upset here and there, and maybe I got mine in Italy, but I did say they'd make a deep run. I just think that England could lose to Sweden, and I wouldn't be terribly shocked. I'm so sorry to everybody that's already started singing "It's Coming Home."
This today for Norway, some would consider it an upset because Norway's going home. They went 3-0 in the group stage, and then they fall to Italy in this match of the quarterfinals. I think this is a big question mark for where Norway football is going, because Jess, you mentioned it earlier, and a lot of people have said it around this tournament. The individual talent is there, but when you are relying on Caroline Graham-Hansen, Ada Hedberg, Gul Reiten, these players to do everything on their team, is it not enough? So Jess, is it maybe a time for Gemma Granger, for Norway, to pull a France? Say, we're not going with the same group. If we want to do something different, maybe leave off some big names in the next international tournament and start trying to develop some of the younger players. Are we at that point in the narrative for Norway?
Absolutely. We hit it on the nail when we say that they have a lot of great individuals. You look at that roster, my goodness, they look fantastic. But you look at them as a collective, and it's like, ooh, what are you guys trying to do here? I don't see that much of an identity for this Norwegian side, and trying to depend on these individual players. And it's not very, very many who are in this starting lineup for them. I don't think it's enough for them. And, you look at the back line, they look disjointed. I mean, they barely beat Iceland 4-3, in one of the lower tier teams. And so I think that it's about time to hit that reset button, hit that refresh button, and see who they can bring in from their youth national teams and see who can be more standout and being able to come together as a collective. Could it also come from the coaching staff too? Maybe they need to hit the refresh button on that one too. So, it could just be a whole thing for that organization.
I feel like Norway did sort of start to approach a reinvigoration after 2022, but I don't feel like they ever really smashed the button with full intention, because I feel like a lot of the issues that seem to be coming out are a little bit based in identity. Tactically, they're very thin. So like certain gaps in a lot of the roles, like we were talking before we jumped on here, in terms of, yes, they do have big names, but like defensive middies for them is real thin. Fullbacks, again, they don't really have a bench. I think that it's also this sort of clash at this point where it's like this youth coming in and then the vets where they're not, I don't know, there's something in their body language
Yep.
that's telling. And they seem to be more individualistic, and we see this happen at the club level for a lot of teams than they are as a cohesive unit. And I think that they need to repair a lot of those issues first before they even consider a more holistic approach to how they reinvigorate a squad that once was heralded as being great.
I think some of this does fall on the manager as well, Gemma Granger, because it's not like she has just arrived with Norway. She came in January of 2024. That's, I mean, if we're comparing international managers and you compare Gemma Granger to Emma Hayes, Hayes was able to do it, right? There's, I think some onus has to be on the managerial staff and the rotation, because even throughout these group stage matches, we didn't see Gaupset play in the first game. We saw her come off the bench in the second game. And in the third game, she finally earned a start in every single attacking play that Norway went for. She was involved in it, in the buildup, in what they did. Not to mention she had a brace in that game plus 2 assists in the 4-3 win over Iceland. But in this game, like, why wasn't she starting earlier? Why didn't Gaupset have a bigger role in this team if she's going to not only occupy so much of the opposition's minds, because her ability on the flank to play tidy with her feet, combination play, her bravery to go 1v1 and look to go to goal all the time, get end line, pick out runners in the crosses. Gaupset, to me, was such a bright spark for Norway at just 20 years old. Why weren't they using her earlier in the tournament? Which makes me think that they didn't know what was going to come of this, and they didn't have enough faith in her leading into this tournament to use her enough to see that she could bring out more offense. And she didn't look to be on the same page as some of those other attacking threats that Norway has. It was almost like Gaupset was trying to set up for Hedgeberg so often, but it was just off a little bit, lacking urgency, lacking efficiency, and perhaps a shakeup like Bonadé has done with France to say, you know what? If you are a vet, it doesn't mean that you are guaranteed your spot here. It doesn't mean that you're guaranteed a start in these major international tournaments, and you have to earn it a little bit more.
Yeah, I think in the same vein, the things that we talked about for Italy, Norway are falling prey to as well, because they do need to look at their domestic league and get them to full professionalization for them to thrive. Because when you need to have the depth and the academies, and the bare minimum, you need to have the proper attention and the legitimization behind you that will help essentially feed your national team. So that's another failing of theirs that they need to address, but that's systemic.
Well, Italy, they get the job done. They advance to the semis. They will either take on Sweden or England.